There's been a question that's come up a couple times about adding a new system if you already have solar and how that works. And I think that's actually a pretty important point to clarify. Like if you are already in the net metering program and you want to add more panels, the only option available to those customers is the buy all tariff. And part of that is just due to the kind of physical limitations of having two systems behind a customer's meter, but having those RECs be assigned to potentially the green bank and one being assigned to the utility. And then also the difference in how the credits are treated on the utility bill. It wouldn't be possible to mix all of those elements. And so the buy all makes it simple where you can have them separately metered, and that dollar value or on-bill credit value can be applied while still retaining net metering for the original system. So just wanted to clarify that for those customers, the buy all is the only option.
Thanks, Kyle. There was a similar question, I think, to if you have a solar system and want to add storage, will these new incentive programs encourage that? Or and Celia, is that something you know about the new storage program?
Sure, I can comment on that. So our team at the Green Bank spent some time with our utility colleagues to discuss some of these considerations. And when we reviewed the wiring diagrams for both the buy all and the netting option, it became clear that the netting option would more easily accommodate battery storage. In particular, if the customer wants to be able to charge their battery from solar in the event of an outage, which is an advantageous thing, of course. Otherwise, your battery will just have whatever you've charged from the grid before the outage. And then associated with that, if under the netting option, because the solar can charge the battery, batteries charged by solar are able to benefit from the federal investment tax credit, which is of course a big benefit. So it's not that you can't do storage under the buy all, you can, but folks should just be aware that based on the wiring diagrams and similar to what Kyle alluded to with respect to how these things are interconnected, it won't have those benefits that I mentioned.
Yeah, and the one more I'd add, Celia, too, is, and one of the big reasons for Pura authorizing the program was the resilience benefits, right? I mean, that docket really heated up after Tropical Storm Isaias and during that whole investigation, right? So certainly being able to charge from your solar while in island it is one of the benefits. And then I'd just add, though, to the question on whether or not existing solar could add storage, there's certainly, and actually that was the original proposal, right, Celia, from the Green Bank, where you all were going to target existing systems. So I believe that you should be able to add storage to existing and net metered systems.
Yes, that's correct. Thanks for mentioning that. So, and we did also confirm this with the utilities. So existing solar that's on the current net metering policy, you can add storage to that system. And even in the case where you add solar, which would have to be under a buy all, you can still add the battery. My understanding is that you can still add the battery to the net metered portion of the solar. But I have heard that a lot of the time customers don't necessarily need to add solar when retrofitting and adding storage to their existing solar, which is often enough solar to add the storage to it. And then I should just also add that the new battery incentive program also allows for standalone battery storage. So there is an option for customers who aren't installing solar for whatever reasons to have a battery installed that's standalone. So that's another point I just wanted to make.
Terrific, very, very helpful. There was a couple of questions about the caps on commercial solar and the targets for residential solar, and several suggestions. I think Josh even said if the legislature were to indicate a higher target, then that might be something that could be helpful. So just so you know, PACE is planning on putting together some proposals for the next legislative session that include either a removal or a significant increase of the residential caps, higher targets for these residential, this idea of an orderly transition, 50 to 60. We might like to aim higher than that. The restriction of the size of an array to the local load is something we'd like to suggest get lifted as well. And then in addition, based on some work that we've done in the past, also proposing adders or bid preferences for solar canopies. So anyone interested in sort of being involved in those conversations, please reach out to us, but we're going to try to advocate for those things.
Yeah, and I was reading the chat as well, Mark, if you don't mind. I just to clarify too, like, so when I was saying the 50 to 60, that's what we use, like, that's how we interpreted the sustained orderly development of the industry as doing something similar to historic trends. I talked about the IRP and, you know, the pathway to 100% zero carbon by 2040. So the incentives are currently set to kind of hit that target. But like we talked about, right, if we are told explicitly or implicitly that we should do more, then certainly we have the ability to aim for more as well. But the statute, to be clear, is uncapped for resi, and then the C&I caps are, depending on how you want to count, 60 megawatts per year.
Great, let's open it up. There are so many questions, and if anyone would like, you know, had posted one that didn't get answered, I'd say at this point, it looks like we have a hand raised. Hendry, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just curious. I'm very new to all this, Mark, and I know that you guys, you know, PACE and the state have solar targets of like 50 to 60 megawatts coming on per year, right? Is there also similar targets for storage that we're looking for?
Yeah, so Public Act, so yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, was it 2153 was the storage legislation? Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Set the goal for the state of Connecticut for 1,000 megawatts by 2030. So then the PURA authorized program, which the Green Bank largely designed and promoted and are going to be the administrators of with the EDCs. The targets for that program are 580 megawatts, because there's two parts to the legislation. There's PURA authorized programs, and then there's potential deep procurements. So we said, okay, if we're going to get to 1,000, what piece are we carving out? And so the piece we carved out for just co-located systems was 580. And by that, I mean standalone systems would be in addition to that. And then we have, it's a 9-year program. There's targets by 3-year tranches as well. But hopefully that gives you kind of a high level idea of what the kind of storage targets are in Connecticut.
Thank you.
Great. I see Stefan has raised his hand. Stefan Hartman from Earthlight Technologies. Great to see you. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi. Thanks a lot. The question I had has to do with kind of an acknowledgement of the fact that the tariff and the interconnection seems to be a little bit more co-joined now under the new program. And I don't know if the representatives from the EDCs are still on the call, and maybe it's more appropriate for them. But my question is, at the end of 20 years, when the tariff agreement expires, the interconnection agreement would continue, correct? So that solar doesn't have to be shut down or something, right? Like in terms of allocated capacity, at that site. Just curious if any of the panelists have any feedback or knowledge on that.
I don't have definitive knowledge on that. It's my understanding that it does continue, but I don't know that for sure. And I would have to look to our utility colleagues for confirmation of that.
Okay, great. I'll try to track that down. Thank you.
And my understanding is that there's still the interconnection agreement that is separate from the statement of qualification for the tariff. And so to me, that would suggest that you would not have to shut the system off at the end of that statement of qualification life. But yeah, well, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's my presumption too, but I've just noticed more and more the convergence of interconnection and tariff incentive. So I just think it's worthy of clarification at some point. Thanks, everybody.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And then just to be clear too on that why they're converging, the only real reason was administrative efficiency. And then hopefully there's only one portal that developers will have to go through instead of two. So Kyle and Mike can tell me if that's not helpful at all, but that was the thought.
Great, I see that Diane has a question. So Diane, feel free to unmute yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you. This is an enchanting and amazing event. I'm not in any way suggesting this is easy to explain. And I thank you, Mark, for trying to whittle this down to an elevator speech. My question and thought is this. I used to regulate PCBs, and that I feel, and many feel, it was a horribly written regulation, and we would try to explain it to the people we were actually visiting, and one could see their eyes glaze over. I have seen a similar kind of look when I attempt to explain to local officials and state officials a little bit about the solar program and how there are differences. So what I wanted to know is, to save and make sure, while I appreciate Mike Trahan saying, just talk to your contractor, I want to make sure everyone's pretty much saying the same thing. So can Pura and or Green Bank spend some of the money, or have the utilities spend the money to have a much more succinct explanation of comparisons using pictorials like we see in Doodly, which is an app you can buy. It makes things, puts things in pictures, and it makes it easier for the explanation, because even though I understood most of what was discussed today, the acronyms that were flying made it very difficult to, as we all know, we all have to study more and read this and reread and re-listen. But I have a feeling if we really want to expedite this, we really need to have truly layman's terms. It has to happen. Otherwise, our towns and our state legislators who are voting on some of these things, they're busy with hundreds of other things. So can we find a way to find science communicators that can help you turn your words into pictures, graphs that are easy to understand? And I thank you very much for today's event.
Yeah, thank you for that, Diane. I couldn't agree more. Certainly, this is not the same presentation. I think probably all the panelists would. This isn't the same presentation I'd give legislators, right, or town officials. We've really struggled. We get questions every legislative session about the current programs, and so we do really struggle with. And it's interesting too. We hear kind of the refrain that people understand I think people understand net metering better than they understand the alternatives, right? So it's certainly one of those. I think the baseline we're starting from is very complex. So it's definitely a difficult task. I think I'll take that suggestion back. I think there were some great I don't know if you had the chance to listen to Tuesday's presentation from the EDCs. They had some great diagrams of the difference between the netting and buy-all tariffs. The Green Bank is like one of the best communicators of complex programs that I've seen in agencies. So they've done a lot of work in other programs on that. But that's certainly something we'll take back and think about more. The last thing I'll say is one of the grid mod tracks that we have we call them REOs, which doesn't help your terminology problem. But the ninth track essentially was this docket that was looking at all the data and how we perform these programs. What the ultimate goal of that docket, and we haven't forgotten about it for those that are following, we are still moving forward, was an annual report that very simply, succinctly described these programs and gave key data and metrics that was easily digestible for just the common person and also legislators. So that is one thing we're working on in that track separately.
Great, thank you, Diane. Any other questions? I know there's some still in the chat we haven't gotten to. Is there someone who would particularly would like to make a point? Diane, Keith?
Yeah, I am looking at something that Eversource put together as a bill stuffer a while ago. It was in an October bill, so it was probably a year ago, October. But the point is, it literally says nothing specific about energy efficiency or renewable energy, and then just directs people to eversource.com website. And I'm wondering why the marketing fees go entirely to the utilities, because I see them as conflicted in terms of actual deployment of renewable energy. Can you explain why Pura has delegated that only to them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think those are all fair points. I'm smiling a little bit because this could get the answer to this is a tricky one. So we have it. So there's a couple of different answers there. First off, I mean, we have just frankly, we have a small staff and aren't able to do a lot of that direct promotion. That's not like traditionally how utility regulation works. We the utilities have programs and things that they do, and so then they are responsible for the promotion of those programs. So that I'd say that's the first thing. The second thing is there's a tricky legal question as to whether or not we actually even have the ability to, because I think what you're getting at, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is whether or not a third party could be authorized to do something like that. And there, it's an unresolved legal question whether or not we actually would have the ability to even direct someone other than the utilities to promote those programs. So
wait, can I just ask, does that mean
Sure.
that we need a legislative fix to get some competitiveness into that process so that you could have an RFP to a third party to compete for those services?
that would clarify things, yes.
Yeah, just so you know, there is nothing, as I'm 3 clicks into the Eversource website, and there's not a single visible public rebate on that website. So they're directing people to the wrong website, given that it's Energize CT that actually has the specifics. So I think we really have a problem here.
I will just add one, there is one step of progress, which is that just recently that the utilities came out with what's called the Community Partnership Energy Efficiency Initiative, CPEEI, where they will they will allocate part of their marketing grant to towns. And we participated in this. I think there were 10 approved projects, some of whom were on this call today. So that is a step towards, if you have local volunteers, it's a step where you would be empowered, funded to a certain extent to do some of that work locally. And that would be found if you Google Energize CT and partnership, you'll find that program.
Thanks.
Thanks, Diane. Any other questions, comments? So as I mentioned, we will distribute everything that you've seen today, including the chat. And I just can't say it, as Bernie said before, this chat is unbelievable, and it continues to grow. So there's links in there. I just put a link in for the glossary that we talked about before. And there's Mike Johan just put some links in. There's a lot of good stuff there. So you've all got homework now. Not only did you have to listen to this, you've now got homework to go study the chat and the Eversource UI presentation from a couple of days ago. So I think, as Mike said, there's no reason that we all can't understand this program going forward. I think the EDCs are making themselves available, and just an extra thank you to our speakers today. Thanks for sticking around. And if there are no last questions, we will let you all head off for lunch. Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.